Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us, Melissa, as well. I think you might be on mute at the moment, so but that's fine. Just unmute whenever you're ready. Is that okay?
Got it.
Thank you. Okay, well, a very warm welcome to everyone who's joining this webinar this evening. Thank you very much for joining us. We are, of course, going to be discussing applying for the John Schofield Trust 2023 Early Career Fellowship Scheme. So my name's Zeba Malik. I am a trustee of the charity and a former journalist. I worked in news for 20 years. We are joined by David, who's the CEO of the charity, and Howard, who's the fellowship manager. So both David and Howard will be talking us through how to apply for the scheme, what it involves. And we're also extremely fortunate to be joined this evening also by Florence and Melissa. So both Florence and Melissa have actually gone through the whole procedure of applying for the scheme and were successful, and now are both fellows of the trust. And I'm really delighted to say that both have done extremely well in their early career journalism professions as well. So just as an introduction to Florence, so Florence is a journalist at BBC Real, where she produces and presents digital videos, documentaries and social media content. She sits on the board of BBC Ability. Now BBC Ability supports disabled staff at the BBC and acts as a source of advice for the wider organisation. She is a 2022 John Schofield Trust Fellow, and her mentor was Sky News' science correspondent Thomas Moore. So thank you for joining us. And Melissa is currently the planning producer for the News Agents podcast, which I'm sure you've all heard about. It's the new podcast hosted by Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall, all previously from the BBC. Previously, Melissa was the Channel 4 News' inaugural Leeds interview producer, and she's worked at Times Radio from its launch in June 2020. She started off as a broadcast assistant and then was promoted to assistant producer for a variety of programs at Times Radio. Her writing has been featured in the New Writing North's New Narratives, as well as the award-winning audio series Anthems. Her mentor is Angela Clark, an assistant news editor at BBC Radio 5 Live. So thank you both very much. I'm sure we'll be hearing in some detail about what you've both been up to since your application, and actually what you learned through your application for the trust as well. I just want to remind you that this webinar is being recorded. It will be shown on the Trust YouTube channel and also shared on various aspects of our social media as well. Please do send in any questions that you have, because we will try very hard to get those discussed. And the whole idea of this webinar is genuinely to help potential applicants and guide you through the scheme, basically through the application. So first we'll hear from David. Like I say, David is the CEO of the John Schofield Trust. So David, should we start just by kind of go back to basics in terms of understanding what the John Schofield Trust is and what it wants to achieve, if that's okay?
You know, but I think in a way your introduction to Melissa is a really great illustration of what the John Schofield Trust is. So Melissa is working on the fantastic new podcast, News Agents. Now, all of the people involved in that podcast are in one way or another involved with the John Schofield Trust. So Emily Maitlis and John Sokol are both senior fellows of the John Schofield Trust. They've mentored for us in the past. Lewis Goodall, who's also on air, is a fellow of the John Schofield Trust. He was mentored by us a few years ago. Dino Sophos, who is the brains behind it, if I can use that word, lots of brains involved, but he's the man behind it, is mentoring for us this year, another senior fellow of the Trust, and of course Melissa. And I think people who get involved in the John Schofield Trust find that there are John Schofield Trust fellows and senior fellows and people who've worked with us, really working in all areas of the media, in newsrooms across the country. And that really does mean across the country. It doesn't just mean in London. It means we have fellows in Scotland, in Northern Ireland, in Wales, in parts of England outside London. And for the first time, we are recruiting this year in the Republic of Ireland. And so we will have, for the first time, candidates applying to us from the Republic of Ireland. The John Schofield Trust was founded to commemorate a talented young journalist who was killed while reporting for the BBC in 1995. And John Schofield had worked for Channel 4 News and was on assignment from The World Tonight when he was killed. He was a journalist who was marked out by his peers as a future star in the profession, and he was marked out by everybody who worked with him as a warm and supportive and talented journalist. And in the aftermath of John Schofield's death, his family and friends formed a trust to keep John Schofield's name alive, but also to support young journalists as they begin their careers. Now, you've heard there I said the word young journalist, and I shouldn't, because people often hear early career journalist as young journalist. I should say that one of our fellows this year is in her 50s and is coming to journalism after an entire other career. So forgive my slip of the tongue. We're looking for early career journalists, no age limit to apply to us. But we are looking for people in that crucial period who've started their career, who've done 2 years and up to 5 years. And that's the kind of area we're looking at in terms of eligibility. If you apply to the trust and you are successfully admitted, and this webinar is very much about that, about talking you through the process, about giving you some insights into how to apply. If you are successfully admitted to the John Schofield Trust for Mentorship, then you get a number of things. You get 12 months of mentorship. We pair you up with the person in the industry who we think is best placed to support you. So in your application form, you'll have the opportunity to tell us about yourself and tell us about the kind of things you want to achieve within this 12-month period. And we will read that application form and we will try and find you the person who we think is best suited to support you. You'll see that person regularly, whether like this, via Zoom or in person, and they will put in place a kind of structured mentorship program for you so that by the end of 12 months, hopefully you will be, if not exactly where you want to be, you'll certainly be on the way to do that. As well as the mentorship, we run monthly free webinars and masterclasses, which are focused on sort of professional development. So in the past, you can have a look on our YouTube channel for all of the webinars we've done. We've done masterclasses on things like how to be a foreign correspondent, how to be a science correspondent, how to present a news program. So they're very much tailored to kind of professional development. And we want to sort of program them in the future in dialogue with you. So if you come on board and you say, do you know what I would really like? I would really love a webinar about, I don't know, how to become a health correspondent or how to become a data journalist. We would absolutely listen to that and we would do our best to program that. There are opportunities to meet during the year. Those have been hard to come by over the last couple of years as we've all hunkered down under COVID, but now we have the opportunity to meet again. There will be opportunities throughout the year where we get the chance to meet for either live masterclasses or other kind of networking events. And you also get the chance to take advantage of the best publicity in town, which is the John Schofield Trust newsletter, which if you haven't subscribed to it yet, I would really advise everyone to go onto the website now and subscribe to it. Because what it does is it allows people who are part of our network to send us regular news, to say, good news, I've just been appointed AP on this program, or I've just done my first piece to camera, or I've just produced my first piece for Panorama, or my first podcast. And we share that news with our network. And people kind of think, so? Well, the point is that the people who get that newsletter are some of the most senior people in the media in the UK, and are often in hiring positions to potentially recruit new staff. And so basically what you're doing is you're getting your news in front of people who down the line might be making choices about filling their newsrooms. But the key thing is, this is not just about personal career advancement. We like to think that this mentorship scheme is really a kind of rocket booster to your career. But the point is that the trust is motivated by something more important than just personal success. And that is, we look at this brilliant profession of journalism and we say, it could be so much better if it was so much more representative of the country we live in. And so the key driver for the trust is that we are fighting to increase the diversity of the journalism profession. We are fighting to increase the number of candidates who come to this profession from unrepresented parts of the UK, from unrepresented backgrounds. And if you go onto our website, we list very clearly the ways in which the people who we work with lead the profession in terms of their diversity. So we work with a larger number of people with disabilities, a larger number of people who come from socioeconomic backgrounds which are underrepresented. Larger number of our fellows are LGBTQ+. So, you know, in that way, we are trying to do our bit to broaden the pipeline of talent coming into the profession, to really give people a helping hand if at the moment they are kind of underrepresented in journalism. So there's a lot there to digest, but the key takeaways are that we believe that the John Schofield Trust is a really fantastic network of people to get involved in. We get a lot of feedback from people who work with us saying that involvement with the trust has really advanced their career, really helped them, really provided them with a kind of mentorship and support. But if you are applying to us and if you are working with us, you're joining something bigger than that. You're joining an organization which has the ambition to kind of make a difference, transform the institution of journalism, add to its diversity, grow its diversity, and that's what you will be becoming part of. So I really would encourage you all to apply. I hope that there'll be lots of key kind of takeaway points from this webinar. I know Howard is going to go through the application form in some detail, and I know that Florence and Melissa have got really valuable things to say about their own experience of applying, submitting an application, choosing their referee, being selected, and indeed the mentorship program. But I want to say thank you for joining us tonight. Please put your application in. Please make sure it reaches us by the end of the month. And please, please, please make sure that the referee that you choose gets their reference in at the same time and by the end of the month, because we really want to consider your application. And it's always a kind of heartbreaking part of this job when we look at applications which look great, but they've come in too late or the reference hasn't come in. So don't put us in that difficult position. Just make sure that you apply. And please ask as many questions as you would like. And if you're like me and you come out of these things and you think, if only I'd asked that question, please follow up. You can email us at info@johnscofieldtrust.org.uk. But anyway, back to you, Zeba. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you. And just to remind you all that, of course, the application process has started. It opened up on the 1st of September, and there is a very specific deadline date, which is 1 minute before midnight on the 30th of September. So, of course, you still have time, but it is a very specific deadline. So please use the information that David and now Howard are going to share with you in terms of making an application as well. So Howard, if you could kindly just talk us through the process and the actual application as well, if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to share my screen. So hopefully this website will be familiar. If you go straight onto the top menu bar here, face-to-face mentoring, this is really the kind of the place where you can find most of the information about the application process. It tells you a little bit about what David was talking about, so kind of why the scheme exists, what the purpose of the scheme is, how the scheme works. Also talks a little bit about what happens once we receive your applications and the kind of the judging process. So, and I think we can talk a little bit more about that towards the end of the session as well. But the key thing here is these are the links to the application form. So under this section, how to apply, hopefully you can see my mouse. You'll see obviously this webinar advertised, but then the eligibility criteria. And this is an important starting point, I would say, for you. So I would suggest reading through this very carefully. If you still have questions after this, obviously ask them during this webinar, but if you're not sure if you kind of fit into this criteria, do please reach out to us. You can even send us a DM on Twitter if you don't want to email, and we'll kind of clarify for you. But the main categories are sort of aged 18 or over on the 1st of September 2023. So if you did reach 18 recently, happy birthday. But the other two important ones are you're either working as a broadcast multimedia journalist in the UK or the Republic of Ireland, where we now operate, employed or freelance. So not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to be in a kind of full-time role. Also apprentice journalist on an NCTJ approved journalism apprenticeship scheme in the UK or the Republic of Ireland, or a non-graduate journalism training scheme. If you're not an apprentice, if you're not in those categories, you need to be within the first 2 to 5 years your professional life or career in the news industry. And we're not just talking about kind of, you know, a news presenter, we're talking about broadcast and multimedia, and that spans obviously a wide section of roles. If you are an apprentice, you need to have done at least 6 months as an apprentice in this scheme, and it needs to include, it needs to be accredited, obviously, firstly, but also it needs to include a relevant diploma by the time the scheme begins. The focus, obviously, for us is reaching people early on in their career who we can add them the most value to, and, you know, when they're in need of the most kind of development and support from us, and that's why we focus on those categories. And obviously our focus is on people who are currently underrepresented in the media, and the mission is to kind of make newsrooms as diverse as the audiences that they serve. So that's kind of broadly the eligibility criteria. I think we'll speak more of this throughout, and you'll see from the form I'm about to click on as well. But that should give you a sense. I know we've got some questions already based on that, so I think we'll revisit that as well. I'm sure the fellows will attest to this when they speak, but the earlier you can start, the better. It's not kind of a simple form that you can do in 10 or 15 minutes and kind of job done. You need to get the kind of wheels rolling on a bunch of things, including on your reference. So I would really put time aside, if you can, over the next week or weeks to speak to a referee, sorry, and also to start drafting up your application to give yourself the best possible chance. We're not looking for people with kind of super qualifications and, you know, super squeaky clean kind of professional CVs. We're looking for people who have potential, I think, and where we can help and come in, especially from underrepresented backgrounds. So once you have read through this page, you can see there's 2 links here. Well, there's 3, but we'll ignore the final one. There's 2 links. There's one for the main application form, and then the second one here is for the reference form. You need to fill out both of these forms by the 30th of September at 23:59, so a minute before midnight. We need to have those both in simultaneously. That doesn't mean you submit them at the same time. You could submit your application form, and then your referee could submit their reference form, but as long as they're in before the 30th of September, what we'll then do is kind of compile both of those together, and that will become your complete application form. So now I'm going to move on to the actual application form itself. Bear with me because the thing's actually blocking my second. There we go. Right, so hopefully you can see from here. This is the application form. So once you click through that first link, this is what you'll see. Read obviously the preface, and we refer back to the page that you were just on. But broadly speaking, this is the key part. So these are the sections that you're about to fill in. Section 1 is about eligibility. Section 2 is personal details, so name, etc. Section 3 is about your education and employment history. Section 4 is your kind of pitch to us. And then section 5, we ask a little bit about what kind of mentor you're looking for. We're not just going to match you with someone randomly. We'll kind of select people based on where you're going, what your development needs are, etc., your areas of interest. You know, if you're interested in sort of podcasting, we're not going to match you with someone from print, for example. So that's to help us. Section 6, obviously, we do want to evidence our kind of impact, and we do want to make sure that we're reaching people from different backgrounds, from diverse backgrounds. So we do ask you some kind of information about your background and diversity, and that's really kind of section 6 and 7. And then section 8 is some kind of legal elements around data protection, such as consenting to that. Just to say at the beginning of this as well, if this form is not accessible to you as it currently stands, please do get in touch with us and we can provide it in alternative formats. We can do it alongside you over the phone, etc., that is available. So I'm going to basically go through the form as if I was applying, and hopefully that will be helpful to you. And if you have questions throughout, please do put them in the Q&A box. So yeah, eligibility checker, fairly straightforward. I'm aged 18 or over, obviously need to tick that, and then click which category you are currently in. So for the purposes of this, I'll say I'm currently working as a journalist. The second part of that is how long I've been a journalist or an apprentice. Obviously for this, it would need to be 2 to 5 years. So I click that and go next. I'm not going to fill out my actual details here because it would be really boring to watch, but you can imagine what I'll put in here. First name, surname, pronouns, date of birth. That's not my actual birthday, but there you go. Current home address, which part of the UK or Ireland. This is in terms of the region that you're in or the nation. So let's say I live in Scotland. It's a nice place to live. And email address, mobile phone number, Twitter username. This is not so we can kind of snoop on you beforehand. This is just so, you know, we have an awareness that you have a profile already and that you are kind of using all forms of communication. But it's not a massive deal if you don't have one. Just write none if so. And then also LinkedIn profile. And then we go next. Someone shout, by the way, if I'm going too fast. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit as well for you all. Next section is around education and employment. As I said before, we're not looking for kind of lots and lots of fancy qualifications. It's great if you do have some, but this is just so we can get a kind of holistic picture of you as an applicant. Current employer, obviously, if you're freelance, you might have more than one employer. Here, I would suggest putting in either your most recent employer or your most kind of common employer. So, for example, the BBC. And your current role. The same goes for that. If you're freelance, maybe type in freelance here or type in a role that you were in recently. We also ask for the time you've been in current role, your previous relevant employment history. We're not looking for you to go right back to, you know, the time that you were 15 and had a part-time job in wherever. It's really kind of the last kind of 3 to 5 years, really, and obviously try and keep it relevant to, you know, the application and us considering you for the scheme. So obviously media roles are most important there. Then we go to qualifications. So obviously a bunch of you will have university degrees, A-levels, etc. You may also have professional training, and then you also might not have that much formal training. This again is not a kind of catch to catch you out. This is just for us to kind of fully understand where you're coming from. So just put in here what that has been. And, you know, as it says here, we do really welcome kind of, you don't have to have gone to university to apply for the scheme. We welcome everyone from all sorts of backgrounds. And you'll see that, you know, as David says, if you look on our website and look at our current fellows, they come from a real diversity of backgrounds. Name and location of the most recent school, college or equivalent, digital skills and experience. Again, to get a sense of where you're coming from. Don't be worried if you don't have loads of these, just kind of put in what you think there. And then your interests outside of journalism. You know, we're not expecting a kind of full list of all your social activities or anything else. Kind of anything that you think, you know, kind of adds a bit of flavor to your application. I think I do have to put some things in there. So let me just do that really quickly. Okay, and then we go to the next page, which is probably the bit that'll take you at least a big chunk of the time. This is your pitch to us. So, you know, putting aside qualifications, putting aside kind of those factual details that we've just come on, this is your chance to kind of tell us, you know, who you are and, you know, kind of what your background is. So really kind of talk about why you would like a place on the scheme and kind of what you think you would get out of it as well. Spend some time thinking about this and writing it because it is important. We also encourage, because obviously we have to read through a lot of these, we encourage as well, if you want to do an audio recording or a video, obviously 3 minutes in length, you can share the link here of the Dropbox location, or if you've got private YouTube or something. So do upload that. If you use other websites such as WeShare It or WeShare, just be careful, because those do have limits to how long the person who is receiving them can download. So, you know, if that date is before the 30th of September, it might go kind of out of date, and then we won't be able to look at it. So just be careful of details like that when you do share. And if you have any issues with that, just drop us an email and we can suggest. But yeah, so this is you kind of explaining why you would like a place on the scheme and why you think you would benefit.
Howard,
Then we want, yeah.
Howard, in terms of the expiry of we send it, do we have a preferred way of sending us?
Yeah, so our preferred is probably Dropbox. That's the most reliable we found up to date. And I think you can set up a free account, if I'm not mistaken. So that's the preferred one. So do use that if you can. If not, I know some people, you can send a direct link to a YouTube video, so it's not a public video, but people who have the link can view it. And then I know also Google Drive can allow you to share particular files. But to make our lives as easy as possible, please use Dropbox. But obviously we won't reject it if you don't. As long as we can see the content, that's the important thing. And then the second part is for us to get a sample of an assignment or a story you have worked on. You know, you don't have to go into too much detail about what the story is. We're mainly focused on how you were involved and what your contribution was, and sort of, you know, how you rose to the challenge. Again, this can be written, 250 words limit, or we can do a 3-minute audio or video, and same rules apply around Dropbox. What I will say on this one as well is we have people from all sorts of types of roles within journalism and the production of journalism that come forward. You know, we're not expecting I mean, it might be, but we're not expecting your name to be at the top of this article, or, you know, even to get credited half the time. As long as you can talk about how you were involved in the production of it, that's what's important, you know. So if you were involved in researching a investigative piece, or producing a program or a short clip or something, and you've been involved, you can use that. You know, there's no need for you to kind of list a credit of other people who are involved. As long as you're involved in some form and you can explain how you're involved, that's the key element. Does that make sense for everyone listening? Yeah. Okay. And then this bit is, as I said, this bit is focused on your mentor. We have, you know, we're lucky enough in the trust to have a large pool of people who have volunteered and kindly kind of offered their time to mentor you guys. So, you know, we want a little bit of help in terms of pairing you with someone who would be a good fit in terms of, like, you know, they're from the same area of interest. Maybe they had a similar journey that you went through. We need to get a sense of kind of what your preferences are. We can't promise that we're going to get the perfect person, but we'll get someone as close as possible to that. And I'm sure our fellows will attest on the call to their experiences with that. So just select up to 3 of these in terms of what are the areas that interest you. You don't have to be, this isn't, you know, a contract. This isn't signing you up to be, you know, if you type digital journalism, we're not going to kind of hold you to that forever. It's kind of where you are now in your head, or where you think you might be going. And I know this list won't be extensive as well. So if there's something we've missed out, you can see in the other box here, you can type that there, just to kind of help us in terms of when we look for a mentor. The other part of looking for a mentor and matching with your mentor is life experience. You know, not everyone is going to understand someone's sort of lived experience. So we've given you a space here to talk about your kind of range of experiences and what you think it might be helpful for your own mentor to kind of understand at that level. So for example, if you have a disability, obviously there's particular barriers that means exist within journalism for people with disabilities. Maybe you would prefer someone who understands that because they have a disability. You know, it might not be as kind of simple as that. It might be nuanced, but just kind of explain in this answer here what your, you know, what your preferences are in terms of the person that we select to be a mentor, and we'll do our best to help with that. The other thing is, it's not obviously, it's not just demographics. It can be, you know, you really struggle in terms of understanding career direction. There's a particular problem in terms of you deciding where you want to go next, and there might be someone in our pool who understands that. Maybe you're in one section of the media now and you want to move to a totally different other section. You'd be surprised the number of people we know who've been through that exact journey, and therefore we'd want to try and match you with someone who kind of can give you the most relevant advice. Then this is sort of a bit about, obviously this is face-to-face mentoring, so we want the majority of your meetings with your mentor to be in person. That's not always possible for all sorts of reasons, and that's why a bunch of things will be done virtually and over Zoom and calls just like this. But please be kind of open with us about what is possible for you. So we've given 3 categories there. You know, you're flexible and you can travel to meet them. Ideally, your mentor will be in the same location as your job, which you told us where that was earlier, but you're prepared to travel occasionally. And then this category where it is essential to me that my mentor works in the same area as I do. That really would be because, you know, you don't get to travel outside of that location very much, and you're just being upfront with us about that. I should say that, you know, we do provide a kind of discretionary fund. We do have a pot of money available for people to travel to see their mentor or vice versa, if, you know, you don't live or work in the same area. So there is help available. You're not going to be expected to, if you can't afford it, you're not going to be expected to pay for the train journey every time you need to go and visit your mentor. But where possible, we try and match with someone who is within, you know, a distance where it's convenient. Okay, going to the next page now. Oh, I think I've only ticked very scrupulous form. I've only ticked 2, so we'll go to the next now. This is a bit more about your background, so just getting an understanding of things like school. I'm just going to click whichever on this. I think these are kind of self-explanatory. You probably don't need me to go into too much detail, but it's for us to get a sense. Obviously, we're focused on kind of underrepresented groups and having a diverse pool of mentees, so we want to kind of get a sense of where your background is. You don't have to answer these questions, you don't have to tell us, but it does kind of help us build up a picture of the applicant. We ask questions. I think these are around social mobility, so these are kind of typical questions that give barometers and indicators of kind of social mobility, so this is why we ask these. And then there's this question, thinking back to when you were age 14, what best describes the sort of work the main high income in your household did in their main job? So fill whichever is relevant. And then we have this question, because I should say we particularly welcome people who've been in care at some point in their life. This is obviously a massively underrepresented group in journalism. So if you have, please tell us. And then this thing about being the first in your family to attend higher education, which is obviously university. Okay, finally, just some diversity monitoring ones. I'm lying there, I'm actually not. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I'm not in that category. Ethnicity, just click whatever there, which is your actual ethnicity. And then around disability. And then this is your chance to tell us if there will be any kind of physical access barriers to you in terms of engaging with it. So if there are any disabilities or access needs that we should know about, please, 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 you know, include that here. We won't include this bit in terms of judging whether you can be successful in the scheme or not. It's just for us to know, because, you know, we're kind of access positive, so we want to be as accessible to as wide a group of people as possible. So please do tell us upfront about anything like that, and obviously remain confidential. Gender identity, sexual orientation, and then whichever religion or belief you are here. And then finally, whether you want to be notified about communications, about events, etc. We also happily will give all fellows this year a free complimentary subscription to the New York Times. So just indicate to us that you're happy for us to share your name and email address. We won't share anything else. So you can receive that. And then finally, just a consent that you agree, and you can find our privacy policy and our data sharing kind of agreements on this website. And then finally, you click submit. Hopefully that wasn't too painful to listen to. I should say the other form, just to do that quickly, just click through to that. The other form is the reference form. And this is, you'll be pleased to hear, this is a much more straightforward form. This is not for you to fill out, this is for your referee to fill out. So everyone who applies to the scheme needs a referee, and you will send them. So what you would do, probably quite early on actually, maybe even before you do the application form, is you would seek out a referee. That could be your line manager if they know you well. It could also just be someone you've worked with, a colleague, someone senior in your organization that you work in now, or if it's an apprentice, it could be an academic or a tutor. The key thing here is that you've worked with them or studied with them recently, and they're able to talk confidently about your abilities. So you may need to kind of have a think about who'd be best for this, and we'll see if they're happy to fill out this form. It really doesn't take longer than kind of half an hour max, I would say. Again, we just talk about the eligibility criteria and personal information, and then we ask them some simple questions. So name, phone number, job title, employer, the name of you who is applying, the relationship with you. So it could be colleague, it could be manager, teacher, etc., etc. They're going to talk a little bit about what qualities they think you have and what they think makes you stand out. Obviously, there's a bit of a limit on this, 2,500 characters, and we're looking for them to just add some information to the application that you put through. And then also they talk about how you benefit from the mentoring scheme. Anything basically that strengthens your application itself. So, I would say that the main thing is to kind of go with someone who knows you quite well and knows your work and can speak to your strengths. I think that is the main points. Let me just check this. Deadline again is the 30th of September. Both forms need to be in by then. If you have any issues whatsoever, please just reach out to us. We're happy to talk to you and talk you through any questions that might seem particularly badly worded or difficult to kind of comprehend or whatever. It's info@johnscofieldtrust.org.uk, which I'll put up on the chat in a minute as well. Or you can DM us on Twitter or whatever else you see fit. So I'm going to...
Thank you, David, and thank you very much, Howard, for that very detailed look. We've got quite a few questions coming in, so and of course we really want to hear from Florence and Melissa. Thank you for your patience. David, can we just come to you briefly, just so we can understand what happens to the applications once that deadline is up of the 30th of September? If you could just talk us briefly through the process in terms of the selection. You're a mute as well, David, sorry. Easily done, isn't it?
Thank you.
Okay.
Not only did I mute myself, I think I also booted Howard out of the call. So it's a technological high point for me. Okay, so when we get the applications in, we do a quick look for eligibility. So this is where the issue of between 2 and 5 years comes out. So we go through to make sure that all of the applicants have indeed got between 2 and 5 years of experience. And we also check that everybody who has applied has got a reference which has come in. And as I said earlier, it's always disappointing to not be able to put people through for those reasons. But each year, some people who would have made really great candidates, their references don't come in, and so we're not able to advance. We then share the applications with a group of experienced journalists who we work with to make a selection. And so we basically bundle up all the applicants. We hand over bundles of around 10 or 12 applications to our selection panel, who go through each application very carefully and basically say, these are the people who I'm interested in finding out more about and discussing. And then we have a very big meeting in which everybody comes together with their piles and we kind of go through. The other key thing that we do is we anonymize all of the applications. So your names are removed and you're given a number, and we talk about candidate 4 and candidate 16 and candidate 72. So all the applications are anonymized. And once we have selected the people who we are interested in, we then move to the next stage, which is thinking about who that we would like to match them up with in terms of mentors. And sometimes, as Howard said, it can be comparatively straightforward. Somebody says, I want to become a foreign correspondent. And we've obviously worked with a lot of foreign correspondents, and we see if any of the people who want to mentor for us this year are available and are interested. Sometimes you throw us more challenging things. So you say things like, I've had to take a lot of time out of the newsroom in the last couple of years because I've had COVID, and I'm now returning to the newsroom after a long break, and I would really like a mentor who has experience of that. And so we would then look to the network of people who mentor for us and say, does anyone have this kind of experience who would like to work with this candidate? And sometimes the requirements are, as Howard said, I want to work with someone who's in the same town as me, or I want to work with somebody, so there are other things. And so basically what we hope is that by the end of the process, not only have we selected the best cohort for us to become fellows for 2023, but we've also made the best matches in terms of you, in terms of where you are, both geographically and in your career, and where you want to go in terms of your career. And I should say as well that throughout the mentoring year, we monitor and keep talking to everyone that's involved in the mentoring process. So you'll get, Howard will be in touch to say, how are you getting on? Are you managing to meet your mentor with the regularity that you would like? And we also talk to mentors to make sure that the relationships are working out in the way that we want. And human beings being human beings, sometimes there are issues that need to be picked up along the way. And so people will say to us, this issue has emerged. I wonder if you could, recommend a way through it. So, there are occasionally relationships that don't work, or, we as the trust try and make sure that we have the backs of all the people that we work with, have the backs of the people who we're mentoring, but we also have the backs of the people who mentor with us. And so, we kind of work occasionally to kind of intervene to kind of find a way forward in a mentoring relationship. But I think it's fair to say that, largely the mentoring relationships are rewarding and lead to lasting kind of professional friendships. And certainly, I know I get a lot of emails from people who say things like, I was mentored back in 2015, and now I would like to become a mentor because it was a really rewarding thing for me. Or people who say, I met up last week with the person who mentored me back in 2019, and we had a great kind of catch up. So we know that a lot of these, relationships really last, and I think that really speaks to the care which goes into the matching process. But of course, if you need us to pick up anything at any point in the future, you've got to say, so sometimes you need to flag that up. And the trust has got a very good kind of safeguarding and all the rest of it to make sure that all of our mentee and mentor relationships are as rewarding as they can be.
Thank you, David. And I think it's just fair to say that, fairly recently the trust has changed from, officially being a kind of a mentoring scheme to a fellowship scheme. And that really is to demonstrate that we really want to support people who take part in the program for much longer than a year. And it's a very, it's a very positive networking kind of situation for everyone involved as well. So please don't.
And yes, I think that's absolutely right. And it's,
don't look at it.
I was just going to say, I totally agree. And I'm amazed at the number of people I get messages from who say exactly that they've been involved in the past, they want to contribute now, and so it does become a sort of, we say, a kind of career-long rewarding kind of support system. And also people might say, I've just started a new job working as an investigative journalist, and I could really do with support. Do you have anyone in the network who can support me? And we will make an effort to find that out. And we don't, it doesn't matter if you are a current fellow or whether you're a fellow from 5 years ago. That resource is there to you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Howard. Thank you, David. So now to you, Florence and Melissa, I'd like to say thank you very much for your patience. So you've both been through the scheme. You've both been had your mentors as well, and really are thriving in your chosen careers as well. So the first question I'm going to ask you both is, what encouraged you to apply to the John Schofield Trust in the first place? At what point were you in your careers that you thought that would be the right avenue for you both to pursue? Florence, if I can maybe start with you first, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. So I had loosely heard about the scheme, through Twitter, through, mainly through Twitter, through social media. And then I heard in the newsroom, when I was working at Channel 4 News, a few different people had been talking about the scheme in the newsroom and how sort of, one, respected it is, but also I was speaking to somebody who'd done it a few years earlier and really like how much it had improved their sort of confidence, and it had given them a network of people to help them sort of build those connections that are really vital in your first few years in the industry. And I really related to that because I entered the industry, 6 months before the pandemic hit, and I really didn't feel like I'd had the opportunity to build those connections that so many people did, say, prior to the pandemic. So yeah, I think that I really wanted that opportunity to meet people, have a mentor, get a bit more, I think like getting my feet on solid ground in the industry and hearing from somebody who'd been in the industry for 20 years or however long a mentor is, and that really helps them giving their perspective and their sort of view of the lay of the land. And yeah, when I had spoken to a few people who had gone through that process, it just sounded like exactly the right thing for me in this moment of my career.
Thank you. Melissa, what was the impetus for you to make your application?
I guess the impetus actually was going to last year's webinar, so exactly a year ago today, because there was something that the person who was doing the scheme at the time had said that it's all well and good having a career, but it's, you don't know what to do. When you don't know what to do with it, that can be the most kind of frustrating thing. If you've got your foot in the door, it's what happens after that can be quite difficult to manage. So that was the thing that really convinced me that this was a scheme that I really needed to do. And so that was the thing that really convinced me that that's what I should be applying for. And it kind of made sense because, like Florence, I'd started working during a pandemic. You don't have those inbuilt structures of support, and there's no time really on a given day for you to talk about your career with colleagues who's just as busy as you are.
Yeah.
And so it was a really it was a kind of a beacon of light to think, actually I can make something out of this. And although my career hadn't got off to the start that I thought it would have done because of the pandemic, there was a way to find a bit of support through managing that.
And Melissa, how did you find the whole application process? And obviously we've heard about that in detail. It hasn't changed significantly since last year, I think, but obviously the focus is still the same, is to have more diverse representation in newsrooms. So any tips that you have for people listening in on the application, what would you say?
I'd say two things that stand out for me. It's that something that Howard and David mentioned earlier, that you've just got to start as early as possible. So give yourself enough time to think about every aspect of the application. And I know that the two sort of chunky bits are those pictures that you make about a piece that you're really proud of, and also the explanation as to why you want to do it, but also have a think about who you'd want your mentor to be, because it can be quite intimidating to think about it, because if you're anything like me, I just wanted someone to tell me what to do. I just wanted someone to give me all the answers. But really, when I sort of thought about it, it was a very specific person that I was looking for. So you don't have to put everything in this application. Give yourself enough time to really think about if there's one thing you can take away from it, whether it's someone who has gone through a career change, if you're starting a new job, if you're working in a different country for the first time, something that you think is going to be very helpful for you in the next year.
Thank you. And Florence, any advice from you in terms of the application?
I want to reiterate what Melissa said about giving yourself the time, because actually it's not just about your own time and managing your own time. You're asking for somebody else to, you know, put some time aside to champion you and to, you know, write 2,500 characters, I think it is, in the box, which, you know, I don't think that's something somebody can necessarily do off the top of their heads. Well, you'd hope not. You'd hope that they would put a bit of time aside to really think that through. So I think that starting as early as possible is one of the key bits of advice I would give. I would also kind of, when you're, you know, going through the form, I think it's really easy to, well, I find anyway, like sometimes it's hard to face the sort of realities. You're going, oh, what type of a journalist am I? I'm so early in my career, you know, oh, I've got all these specific boxes I need to be filling out. We are early career, and, you know, write what you are now and then say what you would like to be in the form. Nobody's expecting you to have, you know, 100 bylines. Nobody's expecting you to have worked, you know, to be on air and reporting already, if that's what you want to do. Yeah, the advice I'd give is just, you know, be honest and give yourself time, like Melissa said.
Yeah, I think that's extremely helpful. And actually having sat through the application process with David and other members of the trust, you know, I'm always fascinated by how many kind of specialisms in journalism we have, whether it's maybe kind of around data or housing or environmental issues as well. So I would also just add to that, please don't worry if you feel that your level of journalism is quite niche. I think there is scope at the trust to nurture that passion and that commitment to a certain type of journalism. And we see with you, you know, Melissa, the way that your career has gone, working on, you know, kind of Apple's best selling podcast at the moment, and Florence, the work that you've done, both presenting and producing. There's certainly variety there, isn't there? Now, just to add,
could I just say,
yes.
Zeba, just on that, I mean, in a way, Florence is a great example of this, because when Florence applied to us, I think you had flagged up that, you know, science journalist was how you were sort of thinking of yourself. And I remember, you know, when we selected you, there was a discussion about, well, you know, who do we find to be the mentor? Because the trust's background is really in a sort of broadcast newsroom way, and we didn't have a huge number of science mentors. And so, you know, you set us a challenge because we knew we wanted you to join as a fellow, and so we went off and we found Thomas Moore from Sky, who's a, you know, brilliant asset to the trust and kind of senior fellow. So in a way, that's a little microcosm of how it should work. That each person who we select sets us a challenge, and we're very happy to go off and find the right person, even if they're not yet part of our network. You know, we're very happy to recruit and find people and persuade them of the value of mentoring for us, so that we make the right match. And I think, you know, that's been a very successful match, I think.
Yeah, can I add to that? That I think when I was going through the form, I had those thoughts. I was thinking, is this too niche? Is this going to rule me out? Are they going to look at me and go, because I didn't want, you know, a science print journalist, because that I'm not a print journalist, and I don't imagine I will be, you know. I like the multimedia element of journalism. I mainly work in video and digital, and I wanted a science journalist who, you know, there aren't that many multimedia science journalists or broadcast science journalists, and I really wanted to be able to see myself in somebody else, you know, further down in the career pathway. And Thomas has been amazing. He has really, really helped my confidence. And on top of that, it's really nice to see that somebody is doing what in your head you would like to be doing, or along the lines of that. And yeah, it's been a really good partnership. So I would say that off the back of that, like you said, there's nothing really too niche. If there's a type of journalism that you would like to see yourself in, I'm sure the trust will find you somebody.
Yes. Melissa, so we mentioned that your mentor was Angela Clark from BBC Radio 5 Live. Maybe if you could elaborate a bit about the relationship that you've had with Angela and where the benefit to you has been in throughout the scheme.
So it was actually something I didn't know at the time. When I got this selected to be on this scheme, I was working at Times Radio, and it was only a few months later that I chose to take on a job at Channel 4 News, which would mean me moving up to Leeds for 6 months. And Angela ended up being the perfect mentor for this. It's almost, I would like to take credit for planning it all in advance, but I can't. It was just chance that she was really able to talk to me through the process of what it's like to start in a new newsroom, having had her experience of moving up to Salford for Radio 5 Live. And so I'd say that has been something that we've spoken a lot about, just that, you know, the process of moving, the process of working in a new space. And we speak once every week, which I know is quite, I mean, some people I know on the scheme speak less frequently with their mentors, but we just developed that kind of established relationship quite early on. And I found that, you know, halfway through the year, when I knew that something else was coming up, when I knew I was applying for the job that I have currently, I really wanted to have Angela on board because she'd been so instrumental in helping me navigate some of the questions I didn't even realize I had about working in a new office. So I think your mentors, when they're sort of, you're first talking to them and you're introducing yourself to them, I just don't think you should be, don't feel that you have to kind of hold back on what you're really wanting them to support you with, because they really do want to help. And so the relationship I've had with her has been really brilliant in helping me kind of in those week to week sort of decisions that I've had to make, as well as the kind of big things as well.
And I think I was also just add to that, you know, I think because we have such a diverse spectrum of mentors as well as fellows, we are very, very fortunate that a lot of our mentors absolutely provide support, not just in terms of career progression, but in terms of confidence and ability to navigate the workplace. If you haven't been used to that, working in a newsroom, I always think takes a very particular kind of person, really, and maybe a particular kinds of skills. So I think they also provide a lot of support on the kind of more emotional aspects of working as a journalist as well. And I
should maybe say as well, Zeba, I think I realize this is something I should have said at the beginning, is that one of the principles that Trust works to is that you will be paired with a mentor who works for a different organization than the one you're employed by. And it's really, really important that, because it means that you can have candid conversations about where you are in your workplace, and without the fear that what you say might come back, you know, so that we really do make huge efforts to make sure that, you know, if you're working at BBC, you'd be paired with someone from Sky or Channel 4 or vice versa. So I think that's another really important principle that the trust adheres to.
Sure. I know we're kind of getting a bit closer to time. I just want to take a few of the questions, if that's okay with you, everyone. But just actually, Florence and Melissa, maybe just a final line from you in terms of why you would encourage anyone to apply for the fellowship program for 2023.
Would you like me to go first?
Yes, Florence, that's fine.
Okay, yeah. So I think that something that I've learned from applying and being on the scheme is that it's really easy when you're early in your career to get in your head. And I think social media can often warp the state of, you know, the state of the media landscape, and you can't tell really, you know, what is important, what isn't important, what sort of decisions should I be making this early in my career, which is very similar to what Melissa said. And I think through applying and having a really solid sort of mentor, having somebody who's seen it, done it all, been in the industry for 20 odd years, it's really sort of grounded me in my decision making, and it's made me think like it's not got to be a million miles an hour. I haven't got to be making all these decisions right now. I just need to be learning, and I need to be absorbing in the industry. And I think having somebody who's older, not necessarily older, who's more experienced, let's put it that way, who can actually, you know, give you advice, but also ground you in the industry is really, really important. And that's what my mentor's done for me. And it's been, you know, one of the highlights of my career so far, being on the scheme. And I've still got a few more months of mentoring. And then, yeah, I really encourage people to apply.
Thank you. Melissa?
I'd say enjoy the process of applying for the scheme. Just do it. If you feel like, you know, make sure that you check the eligibility and try and look at this as a good opportunity to really take that stock take of your own career, and don't put those limitations on yourself if you are eligible, because as David was saying, there are efforts being made to try and find those mentors specific to your interests and your kind of career trajectories, because all the applications I've made for jobs prior to this scheme and a few others that I've made afterwards have been quite daunting and scary. It's all about trying to be a particular person. You have to kind of make sure that you're the best candidate for the job specific that they want you to do. But this is an application where you can just boast about the stuff that you've done and, have a big idea about what you want to do in the future. So enjoy the scheme, enjoy the application, which sounds very odd, but maybe it will make it a little less daunting. And if you have any questions about it, then you can always get in touch directly. I'm sure Florence will be, if you've got any other questions about it, we'll be available to talk about it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I second that. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, if we just have a few moments, I don't know, Howard, if we're okay to kind of just go over, just maybe touch on some of the questions. A lot of them seem to be around eligibility, don't they? So should I just go through a few of them for you and for David? Would that be okay?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so a couple, like I say, I'm just going to start on eligibility. Can you apply if you attend university? And another one is, I'm a trainee journalist doing the second half of my NCTJ course and haven't had my first journalism job yet. Am I eligible to apply? So applying for someone who's at university and applying for someone who's in the second half of their NCTJ course.
David, do you want to answer those?
Sure. So the scheme is not for people who are currently at university, and we are looking for a couple of years of experience. And this does come up a lot. People say, well, I've done a bit of freelancing, and does it count as 2 years? And in a way, we need to kind of put that question back to you, though we will take a judgment on it too. So if you can tell us that you have been freelancing during the end of your university career, you're now working, but that your freelancing adds up to 2 years, and if that is the case, then you can absolutely go through. What I would say to you though is you will be competing with people who have got 2 years of professional work, and so you might take the decision yourself to defer your application for a year to carry on building that portfolio of work, because the trust is not going to go out of business. We're going to be here next year and the years after that. So you might make the decision that your application is going to be stronger when you've got a little more experience under your belt, because you will be competing with people who have got that, who are in that 2 to 5 year window. Yeah. But if you're currently studying, if you're currently doing an undergrad, we need you to wait to apply to us until you're out into the world of work. If you're doing a postgrad, well, we know that some people combine those with working. And also I saw there was a question, someone saying, I have another job which I do to, to sort of pay the bills, but I'm also freelancing on the side. Again, that's absolutely fine, but you need to be realistic about the volume of freelance work that you've done, because if it's a little thin, then maybe it would be better for you to wait until you've got a kind of richer portfolio of things that you can talk to.
Thank you. I think that does help. Yes, there was a question about working part-time. So there's a question from Rihanna. I have a Bachelor of Journalism degree completed in 2016 and completed a diploma in TV presenting in 2021. Currently working in communications full-time, but really want to get back to journalism and broadcast. I imagine I'm older than most applicants. I'm 28. Would I be eligible to apply?
Age doesn't come into it.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, one of our fellows this year is 58. So age is not an issue. You can apply whatever age you are. The only question I think would again be around this 2 years of kind of journalistic experience. It's not clear from your question whether you worked as a journalist between your degrees or worked as a journalist during the degree. You just need to evidence it to us, just need to tell us. If you've been working purely in a comms job after your degree, you might again want to think of sort of developing a kind of journalistic kind of portfolio that you can kind of attest to. I'm very conscious that each case is different. I'm simply saying you need to kind of look at what you've done yourself, because realistically you will be competing with others who've got that 2 to 5 year window.
Nathaniel wants to know, with the example of the piece that has to be submitted, does it have to be a professional piece or is student journalism acceptable?
show us your strongest piece, I think, is what I would say there. You know, and if your strongest piece is a student piece, then you show it to us. But if you have strong pieces that are professional journalistic pieces, then I think that probably that's the one I would lead.
And maybe just a couple of brief ones. Ella has said that she started her first job in the industry. It's not her dream job or indeed the dream organisation, but she feels very fortunate to have secured her first foothold with the potential of good training. Can the trust support her in a situation to get the most out the job and help her secure the next leg up in the industry?
Yes, I mean, where you're working, the organisation you're working for, where you are geographically, does not trouble us for a second. You must apply, and you know, I think lots of people's careers tell the story that you don't have to start off in the place you want to finish up. So yeah, you know, that's not a barrier in any sense.
And just Amrit asks, what period in the year should I keep available for meetings? I suppose that's meetings with the mentor. I mean, they're obviously not set at any particular times, but any feedback that you have for that, David, would be helpful.
Well, I feel as though I've been just speaking. I mean, Howard, did you want to say a little bit about?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so the guidance that we issue between mentors and mentees is that they meet at least once a month. And we know people's diaries will vastly sort of vary between pairs. We don't sort of centrally organize your meetings together. That's something that you do together. So, you know, one of your first meetings will be looking at each other's diaries and going, okay, when is it convenient for us to meet? There might be periods where, because of work or something in health or personal circumstances, you might have to take a break or something. As long as you're communicating with each other and also communicating with us, there's no sort of fixed time, is basically what I'm saying. As long as you can make availability for a couple of hours a month, we're good.
The masterclasses, which is, I suppose, the other sort of date with the trust, tend to be early evening weeknights in the early part of the week. So they tend to be a Tuesday or a Wednesday, partly dictated by the availability of the people who join us. And many of them are then put up on our YouTube channel. Sometimes, for perfectly understandable reasons, we don't put them up on our YouTube channel. So they're either fellows only events, or they're events in which we feel it would be better to have a kind of closed environment in which people can speak more freely. So, for example, we did an event about journalism and mental health, which we felt it was appropriate that people felt they could talk as freely as they wanted. It wouldn't be shared afterwards. But a lot of our content goes up on YouTube afterwards and is shared via our social media. And I sometimes say to people who are considering applying but feel maybe they do want to hold on for a year, you're very, very welcome to join our masterclasses. All the public-facing ones they're all free. Just follow us on social media. Subscribe to our newsletter. I get the emails, so I see one or two of you have done that already. Follow our masterclasses. It might be that that's just what you need to get you into the way of what we're thinking about, and then next year's the year to put your application in. But I don't want to sort of persuade everybody to apply next year. We're also really interested in seeing your applications from this year. I really hope this webinar has kind of answered your questions. If there are anything we haven't got to, any questions, please do feel free to contact Howard, myself. Contact details are on the website, or it's info@johnscofieldtrust.org.uk.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And again, just to remind you, the application deadline is 1 minute before midnight on the 30th of September as well.
Don't leave it that late.
Yes, don't leave it that late, and do start thinking about it. I would say, as someone who's kind of, like I say, been involved in the selection process, don't underestimate how much passion and commitment really comes through in your application as well. It's bizarre. It's really quite tangible in terms of your commitment to and your passion for journalism, how that comes through in your application form as well. So bear that in mind. So we have run over a bit, but hopefully that's been very, very helpful for everyone watching either this evening or some other time. Thank you very much, David and Howard, for putting together a very comprehensive presentation, and a very big thank you to Florence and Melissa. Thank you both so much for sharing your insight and supporting the trust. And indeed, we wish you all the very best with your chosen career, and look very much forward to hearing from you in the future as well. Thank you.